In this session, we'll do an overview and troubleshooting of the hydraulic winch system for both the Speed Screed Cruiser and the heavy-duty concrete finishers. First, we're going to do an overview of the parts that make up the hydraulic winch system. Then, we'll go over how the system works, and we'll wrap up with some common troubleshooting tips. So first, the parts that make up the hydraulic winch system are the tank, the flow control valve, or integrated hydraulic control, the hydraulic motor, the winch spool with cable, the quick disconnect knob, the hydraulic pump, which is mounted out on the end of the screed, and the pump drive coupling, which connects the main shaft to the hydraulic pump. Now that we've reviewed the parts to make up the system, we can go over how the system works. We have a direct drive system, which means the main shaft turns the hydraulic pump directly, not using a secondary belt or pulley system. So the main shaft turns the hydraulic coupler, which in turn turns the hydraulic pump. When the main shaft is turning, we will have oil pumping throughout the complete system. When the flow control knob is fully disengaged or on its slowest or offsetting pump, the oil will be pumping through the complete plumbing and right back into the tank without turning the hydraulic winch spool. As we tighten or turn in the flow control valve, oil starts to get forced through the system back through the hydraulic motor, which turns the winch spool and pulls your screed forward. Now that we've reviewed all the parts and how the system works, we're going to do a few troubleshooting techniques that might come up from time to time. One issue that comes up once in a while is that contractors will say that their hydraulic winch spool has stopped turning, won't turn at all. So what we want to do is we want to run a couple checks. We want to check and make sure that our belt tension is correct on the engine and that the pulley isn't spinning on the belt. Another thing we want to check is we want to check and make sure that when they put the screed together, we didn't accidentally miss some set screws on the main drive shaft, which means maybe part of the shaft is turning and part of the shaft isn't turning. So we also want to check with the screed running full throttle. We want to make sure that our flow control valve is turned all the way in for max speed and that our quick disconnect knob is fully engaged into the winch spool. Without it fully engaged in the winch spool won't turn, just the hydraulic shaft will spin inside of the winch spool. So it's very important we check and make sure that the quick disconnect knob is fully engaged in the spool, which doesn't allow the spool to turn. So if the screed shaft is spinning, what we want to check and make sure that the main shaft is turning the Lovejoy coupler or the pump drive coupler. If it's not turning, either one of the set screws has come loose or fallen out or got sheared off in operation, or perhaps the rubber spider gear inside has become disintegrated over time. So after we've checked the hydraulic drive coupling and the main shaft, make sure they're both spinning, we want to start to focus on the hydraulic motor and winch spool assembly. We've established that the shaft turns and the pump drive coupling spins. So what we want to do now, shut the screed down. We want to pull out the disconnect knob and remove the bolt that holds it to the unit. Take off the cover. Once we get the cover removed, we want to unwind all of the cable that is on the spool itself. And once we get all the cable off, we'll see there's a set screw on the spool that holds it to the main shaft coming off of the hydraulic motor. Remove the set screw, pull the disconnect off, pull the spool off, and we should see the hydraulic shaft, which looks like this, inside connected to the hydraulic motor. Now on this shaft is a couple set screws. If those set screws have been sheared off or came loose over time, maybe the hydraulic motor shaft is just spinning inside of this. If they are fully engaged, it's still in there, and you can't turn this by hand, we just established that there's nothing wrong with the hydraulic motor or the shaft or any of the spool components. So what now we can do is we can focus back on the hydraulic pump. We know that the shaft turns, the coupler turns, and that the hydraulic motor and spool system is all engaging properly. So with that said, we're going to say that the hydraulic pump has ceased to work. The oil, it's no longer pumping oil through the system and needs to be replaced. Another issue that comes up from time to time is guys will say, hey, my Screed turns a little bit, it stops, it lurches, it jerks when it's reeling in or pulling in the cable. So when that happens, we just want to make sure that the cable hasn't become tangled or wrapped around some other obstacle, which might prevent it from wrapping up. So if that's not the case and everything's wrapped properly, we want to check the flow control valve and make sure that it's operating properly. If you're not getting proper control over the winch spool, the hydraulic control unit has probably failed, either through contamination of oil or just over time the pressure regulator inside the block might have broken down. So at that point we want to make sure we've replaced the unit, put on a new hydraulic flow control valve, and we shoot back in business. So in review, one of three things generally can go wrong, and that might be the pump drive coupler being loose, the hydraulic pump, which is either going to be an on or off system. Either it's going to work and spin the motor, or it's not. It doesn't work like halfway. Okay, it's not like if it's jerking, it's a hydraulic pump problem. It's either, if it's on or off and doesn't work at all, the hydraulic pump is likely a suspect. If it jerks and does not operate smoothly, your hydraulic flow control valve is most likely where you want to start and replace that. That concludes this session. We'll follow this up with more tips in the future. Thank you.